Hey guys, Victor here, coming at you again with another video, and today we're going to be doing a tournament recap. Now, as for what tournament we're going to be recapping, it's going to be the recently held Santa Clara Yu-Gi-Oh! Regional, which, it was a lot of fun. For me personally, out of all the regionals that I've gone to in the past, this has probably been like genuinely my favorite one. And that includes like the one that I top 8 with Heroes a few years ago. But yeah, I don't know what it was about this regional because it definitely wasn't the gameplay that had me engaged. As the mole charmies, they're just incredibly irritating to deal with, whether you're going first or second. And I felt like every time they resolved, they just, I don't know, like the game just completely shifted into one player's favor, which just completely sucks. And then Mitsurugi just cringe also. But, I don't want to be negative. Instead, we're going to be focusing on the positives for the most part. And like I said, even with those cards being in the format, it was still a lot of fun, but not because of the cards, more of the players that I got to interact with, as every single round, whether I won or lost, was just honestly like a joy. Whether it's because I was styling with the deck that I was playing with, or just pretty much like the really friendly atmosphere. Now, as for what I was playing, I actually decided to go with Fiendsmith, Tearlament, Lightsworn. And if you want to see like the full-on deck profile with like in-depth discussion, it's literally the exact same 40 card list that I showcased the previous week. So yeah, go check that one out if you want to just like become a little bit more familiar with the deck. And yeah, we'll still talk about this later, but I don't know. As for right now, I guess we're just going to go over it briefly, and then like we'll talk about like the tournament report itself, like with all the rounds that I played, and then we can get a little bit more in depth into what changes I would make. As for why I chose the deck, I was going to play something a little bit more try-hardy originally, but the cards just never came in the mail. And I was pretty much forced to play something that I already had, right? And as a result, I had a couple of choices being Pure Lightsworn, Pure Tearlament, Hero, Dark World, all the decks that I've been constantly showcasing on this channel. And I just opted to go with this one because it was the most fun. And not only that, but I already had my invite, so it's not like I needed to try super hard or anything. I pretty much just ultimately decided to, like I said, have fun. And I wasn't really expected to do that well with the deck, just because, it does auto lose to a lot of charmies, and just like, oh, there are so many hand traps that it is a little bit difficult to navigate in most situations. And I figured if we can get even 1, 2, maybe even 3 wins this entire weekend, it would be great. As for what we actually ended up doing, we went 7-2. So we won 7 times, we lost twice. We lost the first round, and then we ultimately lost the final round, which means that we just barely missed out on top 8, which, it sucks, but it is what it is. You can't win them all as much as you would like to. And then I guess from here, we can just talk about like the tournament itself. So it was 9 rounds of Swiss, as I said earlier, because I said it was 7. I went 7-2 over the entire tournament. I think originally the amount of players was 350, but after all the no-shows, Arcanine, which is the website that Core TCG uses to, actually allow registration, went all the way up to 455. So, a pretty big and sizable regional, all things considered, nothing too easy. And as for the decks that I played, so round 1, I played against Mitsurugi Raizio right off the bat, right? So I ended up winning the die roll, and I have a pretty strong hand, truth be told. It's like Call by the Grave plus like a bunch of extenders, and I ended up getting drolled almost immediately. Now, I could have used Call by the Grave on the droll, but with how strong my hand was, I figured it'd probably just like be okay if I, let me just spread this out. So yeah, I figured it would be okay if I just let the draw resolve, and then I kept the Call by the Grave in my hand in case for like for my opponent's turn, or I just really did not want to try and like Call by the Grave and draw and like hit by like a mole charmy, because my hand would have auto lost immediately. And honestly, like I did pretty well. Like I milled most of my deck. I just could not get to the Tearlament fusion that would have sealed the deal, which, perfectly fine. Then game 2, the same thing happened again. I got drolled turn 1, but this time I had Triple Tactics Talent, and I was able to rip away his Sword Raziel. And after that, he only had like double Ash and a call by. So my end board, Predaplant Drago Stapelia plus Fiendsmith Ezreal was more than enough to just clean up the game. And then game 3, I finally have to go second. My opponent goes full combo, so he has the Field Spell, the Detonator, the Mitsurugi Amakumo, the one that's basically like a pseudo negate, right? Where you have to discard a card if you want to resolve something. And then, as if that wasn't already bad enough, he sets 5. And that's basically just like a death sentence, right? Especially because the sets were Double Solemn Judgment, Crossout Designator, Infinite Impermanence, and then I can't remember if it was Mitsurugi Prayers or the Mitsurugi Omni Negate, but point is, we were never winning that game. It doesn't matter how strong my hand was. That game was just, it was straight up unwinnable. But yeah, so we start off the tournament with a round 1 loss, which, you know, it sucks. But it's nothing new for me. I pretty much always lose the very first round. And then from there, I just have to pull it together and hopefully we do our best. Now on to round 2, we play against a Malice player, and game 1 for round 2, I'm able to go first, I believe. And I set up a pretty strong board that he just can't break through. And then game 2, it's basically just the reverse, right? I didn't have any hand traps, and that's basically just like one of those things that is going to be like a recurring issue throughout the weekend where despite siding in triple Mole Charmifulos and triple Artifact Lantia against decks like Malice, I just would never draw them. And so I basically just have to sit there and watch my opponent full combo, which, you know, more power to him. Nothing wrong with that. You know, it's the game we play. But yeah, so he does full combo. I try to break through his board. I'm able to do it partially, but it's not enough. And so we go to game 3. And from here, we're getting pretty close to time. So obviously I have Scattershot into the side deck. And by close to time, I mean we have like maybe 3 minutes. And I get to go first. So what I can do right off the bat is I am able to side deck cards like Sprite Sprint just so that I have an easier time doing it. But I didn't want to go straight into the Sprite Sprint even though I could have, because if it gets impermed, that typically means I wasted all my resources and then I won't be able to just like play the game, right? Or I won't be able to consistently mill my entire deck. So what I end up doing is I quite literally just mill my entire deck after fighting through a couple of hand traps. And then I never even have to go into the Sprite Sprint. We hit the Scatter Shot with probably like 5 cards left in deck. And, you know, he was a really good sport about it. We laughed a lot because I was just milling constantly, whether it's my deck or his deck, through the use of cards like Pilgrim Reaper, Zombie Vampire, whatever. And, you know, it's not the greatest way to win, but at least it left like a lasting memory because it literally just took me using every single one of my cards in the deck to get to the Scatter Shot at some point. So that was a lot of fun for me, and I'm sure my opponent enjoyed it too because they were just laughing it up, especially after it resolved. So yeah, after round 2, we ended up being 1-1, and then on to round 3. I believe I played against another Mitsurugi Raziel deck, except this time Okay, so yeah, I win the die roll this time again, so we're 3 for 3, which basically never happens. And I'm able to go first. He hits me with like an Impulse and an Imperm, but it doesn't really matter. I'm still able to push through and put up a pretty decently sized board that he can't really break through. And then game 2, Mitsurugi Raziel does Mitsurugi Raziel things. I don't open any of my hand traps once again, so he just full combos me and I can't break through his board. And then game 3, my hand is admittedly a little weaker than normal, but I'm still able to set up just enough interactions to the point where even though he burns all 5 cards in his hand, and has to rely on a card like a Typhon just to try and do something against my board, it's just not enough, right? Like the moment you have Typhon, and especially against like this deck, the game is literally over because it's pretty much always just going to hit by Fiendsmith in Paradise. And yeah, that was that. So I was able to win that one, 2-1. Then for round 4, I played against another Malice player. So this one, I am able to win my 4th consecutive die roll. So, you know, hey, we're in there. And that's pretty good, all things considered, because I'm normally losing every die roll. But yeah, I'm able to do that. I go full combo through a Dominus Impulse and another Infinite Impermanence. But this one was really cool, right? So my hand was pretty weak. I had like a Dragonling Fiendsmith combo and a Tearlament's Rhino Heart. The Rhino Heart, since the Tear Cache doesn't do anything, the Fiendsmith Engraver does get stopped at some point, and then I try to go for like a I read that he has the Infinite Impermanence in his hand, so before I can go for the Dragonling play, in order to go like full combo, right, I go into a sequence and then I bait out the Imperm because he doesn't want the Desiree to come out. Then after the sequence gets negated, I do something really cute where I normal summon the Dragonling, and then using the Dragonling in my level 4 monster, I overlay into the Dugaris that I play. And then Dungaris' effect, I use it to special summon a monster back. So I detach two, and it detaches for cost, right? So hopefully I did this correctly. And then I bring back the Dragonling that I detached, and then I special summon it, and then I full combo him, and immediately he packs it up. So, you know, the power of Dungaris, pretty strong in full display. And let me just make sure I did that correctly. So yep, detach 2 materials from this card, then activate one of the following effects. So yeah. I made sure, you know, that play was legal, and it was really funny when it resolved because the moment it happened, he just scooped it up. I didn't really know what he was playing though, just because I only saw the impulse and the imperms, so it could have very easily just been like Fire King, or Malice. Those are literally the only two, but I guessed wrong, and it happened to be Malice, so my Artifact Lancias did not make it into the main deck from the side. However, something that I did put in from the side deck was my Super Polymerizations. So this card against Malice was honestly kind of like the MVP all weekend, right? As I was able to break their boards, and they really showed their power in this game, right? As he full combos, I literally don't do anything. Then during my draw phase, I activate Super Polymerization because it's in my hand, and I discard my Shuffler. And from there, I basically just have full control of the board, right? As sure, he has like a GWC06 on the field, and he has a Marchair in his hand, but because I have this, the Shuffler in my hand that I discarded, and I have a Call by the Grave, I can stop the Marchair anytime I want. So I basically just need the opponent to activate their GWC06, at which point I will chain my Shuffler, put back all 3 Link monsters back into the extra deck, and the game is just sealed. And that's exactly what happened. So yeah, this card pretty good into Malice, I'm not gonna lie. But we'll get more into that when we actually get to the side deck portion of the video. And then that's round 4. So that was a 2-0, probably one of the only 2-0s I had throughout the entire weekend, I think. Then round 5 happens, and I am playing against a water deck. Yeah, I'm playing against water, and I lose the die roll, and that's just one of those decks that you never want to lose the die roll against, right? Fortunately for me though, he kind of bricked game 1. Like, he had Impulse plus Heavy Infantry and another monster that he could just like normal summon to go for a rank 7, but his board was like super weak. It was literally just Impulse plus Abyss Gaios, which I generally don't care about, plus like an Ash Blossom in his hand. So suffice to say, I'm basically able to just push through his board pretty cleanly, and then we move on to game 2. Game 2 happens. I open up my Super Polymerization, which should allow me in theory to break through his entire board, but he's able to do full combo this time, so that means I end up getting hand looped by the Mooling Glacia. So he goes for the Deep Sea Minstrel whatever first, and then he rips apart my Havness that I have in my hand. Then from there, it's a 50-50 chance, right, of him heading my Super Polymerization because he gets 2 hand rips and I have 4 cards in hand. And unfortunately for me, he gets it. So I'm basically just watching him do full combo, whatever. And in 2 turns, because I let him play like another turn to see if he can kill me, which he just can't, mainly because like of the Mooling Glacia, right? So I just pass turn. Let me be a little bit more specific. So he full loops me, he links off his Mooling Glacia, which means during the next battle phase, he's not going to get a battle phase. So I basically have 2 turns to try and come up with like a strategy or just top deck my way out of the situation, which I don't, but that's perfectly fine. And then we go to game 3. I know both of our decks take a really long time, so I figured I'm probably going to have to scattershot him just to try and win the game, right? And that's basically what happens. So I go full combo, I scattershot him, and then I pass turn. And he has 5 minutes left. So there's no slow playing or anything like that. He has plenty of time to try and break my board, but he's just unable to, right? So with all 5 or all 6 of his cards, I just have every single interruption available. So there's just nothing he can do, especially once I hit like the Shuffler in the graveyard. And the Shufflers are just like brutal in this matchup for him just because I'm able to chain them to his discards and then shuffle back key card like the Dragoon before they're able to activate, right? And that's exactly what I did, so he just wasn't able to gain any resources. If he tried to summon like Atlantean Princes, I'd just pop them or shuffle them back using like my Kaleido Heart or my Primeval Planet. And ultimately, it came down to him trying to summon out the Typhon. But as I said earlier, once the Typhon comes down, that means the Fiendsmith in Paradise is coming down. So the game is literally just wrapped up at that point, because this is just going to shuffle it back and he can no longer summon monsters. So if it wasn't for the scatter shot, we absolutely would have tied. But just because there would have been no more time for me to go on my turn and just like OTK him with all the cards that I had. So definitely glad I decided it in that time. Then for round 6, I played against another Mitsurugi Raziel deck. So, you know, outside of like the water deck, it's quite literally just been all meta up to this point. I lose the die roll, so I think that's my 3rd loss, or it's either my 2nd or my 3rd. I don't remember too much. But that's a deck that you don't want to lose the die roll against. He full combos me, so I just scoop it up without showing him what I'm playing. Go to game 2. I activate Primeval Planet, Pearl or Rhino. My hand is admittedly pretty weak, but it's perfectly fine because I do play Mischief of the Gnomes. I just need to be able to mill it. And I'm pretty much going to have to, because I do get hit by a Fulos at this point, and I don't have an Ash Blossom to stop it, so I can't really commit too much to the field. And fortunately for me, I'm able to mill enough cards to the point where I am able actually to mill the Mischief of the Gnomes. And then because this is a Mitsurugi Raziel deck, this is basically just like an FTK against them, as they cannot summon anything or commit to like any of their extra deck monsters, as every single monster that they add is going to be 1 level lower. And when it comes to like the Mitsurugi Ritual, it has to be like exactly 8, right? And since their guys are 7, they can't summon them, and then they can't go for like any of their rank 4 plays unless they specifically have a like the only way that they can go for rank 4 plays is if they specifically have a sword, no, and the one that the Raziel that summons from the deck plus the Habakiri in order to special summon a level 4 from the deck as well. And it's just not happening when you're having this backed by just like a Kaleido Hearts. So yeah, that was that. And then game 3 was pretty funny because we both bricked. You know, Mitsurugi Raziel does Mitsurugi Raziel things, and when you play a deck that plays like 20 hand traps, you're bound to open them all at some point, and that's exactly what happened to him. Unfortunately, I couldn't really capitalize on that because my hand was also just terrible, as I literally only had a Rhino Heart and a Weiss in my hand. So I normal Rhino Heart, send Tier Cash gets asked, I attack directly, I pass. Then my turn goes, I normal summon Weiss, I try to do Fiendsmith things, but he ends up just, like, I think he, like, judgmented it, right? So the Requiem doesn't come out, so I just have to attack again with Rhino Heart. And then he draws, he sets a monster, my go. I can finally play the game, you know, I have the Engraver, so I go with my Engraver shenanigans. I'm able to attach the Requiem in the graveyard, I just pop, and then because he used Solemn Judgment, I can just attack directly for game. So yeah, like, we both basically just bricked, and even if he had top deck like a Raziel or something, it didn't really matter because I had my own Ash Blossoms in hand that they were just there, they weren't doing anything. But it worked out. And you don't really get those types of games too often with decks like this, but you know, it's all good. Then round 7 comes along, and I play against a a Memento deck. And this is one of those decks that's always really scary to play against, just because I refuse to read any of their cards. Just because I feel like it's just not worth my time and effort. And I always say that, and then I always get my, like, I just always get punished by it. But it worked out, you know, I go first, I win game 1. Game 2, he's able to go first, he wins game 2, and then game 3, much like what happened with the Mitsurugi Raziel guy in the previous round, he just opens up all hand traps. And so while I'm not able to set up like an impressive board, I quite literally just end on SP Little Knight banishing his Baldrake, and then I hope that's enough to help me survive for the next turn. And it is, because he just passes back basically, and then I'm just able to OTK him. But you know, that's just one of those things that, while it sucks that it happens, it happens way more frequently than you think in a format like this, because just everyone is playing so much non-engine that it's just, I don't know, like, that's one of the reasons why I also just don't enjoy playing decks that play so many hand traps, because you're just eventually going to run into a wall where you have nothing but hand traps and you have no starters, and then your opponent, whether their deck is like mediocre or not, or has like a strong hand or not, is eventually just going to be able to beat you. And what can I say? That's Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Then round 8 happens, and it's another Malice match. So I think as of right now, this would be my third Malice matchup. So I've had 3 Mitsurugi Raizuels, 3 Malice, the 1 Memento, and the 1 Mermail Atlantean. So, you know, pretty decent, rough tournament run that I had to go through, especially with this meme deck that I just decided to bring at the last second. But it works out. So we go game 1. He wins the die roll. He full combos me. I literally just don't have anything. Then game 2 goes. I start, I'm able to pretty much showcase the full power of this deck, right? Because he has a lot of interactions, but whether it's because I started with like the Fiendsmith engine first, and then he stops those and tries to interact with that, and then I can move on to the Lightsworn portion of the deck, and then once he's dealt with that, I can finally move on to like the Tearland portion and just completely full combo him. This is probably the game where I was able to showcase the deck just completely fully, right? And it was a lot of fun. So yeah, I was able to win that thanks to my board. And then even though like my board was pretty weak because of all the interactions or all the hand traps that my opponent hit me with, it was still enough to basically just overcome him, right? Because I basically did the same thing that I did to the Mitsurugi Raizio guy game 1, where I was able to just set up like a Dragostapelia with like my field spell, a shuffler, and that's still just like enough to overwhelm my opponent in most situations, especially after they've hit me with 2 to 3 hand traps. Then for game 3, I'm finally, after waiting all weekend, able to draw into my Molcharmy Fuwaloses, and they just put in so much work, right? So I was able to draw like 6-ish cards, but we are getting pretty close to time, admittedly. So I'm gonna have to do some really crazy things just to play the game, essentially. And we were able to do some really crazy stuff this game too, right? Like I was hitting pretty much everything perfectly. I was milling all my Felices, I was hitting all my Felices, my Rhino Hearts, my tier monster names that allow me to fusion summon, and I was just able to overwhelm him to the point where even though he had the GWC face down to regain life points, I still put him in a position where he had to, he basically had to continuously pay, to the point where no matter what would happen, he would have less life points than me, because, you know, like Malice monsters have to pay life points in order to summon themselves back. And even before I got into the battle phase, after he burned the GWC 06, and he was like 600 points or 400 points lower than I was. So even if I didn't go into the battle phase, the game was already over. But I was still able to make like a pretty impressive board. I went into the battle phase, and then I broke down his entire board that was left over after that. And yeah, like I just had more life points. But even without like the time rules, like I was so far ahead that it genuinely did not matter what would happen. And that game was basically secured no matter what. So yeah, it was pretty crazy, because that was definitely the one where I just hit everything that I needed to hit in that situation. So pretty memorable for me, and hopefully for my opponent. Even though I definitely sacked him hard with all my mills, especially the double Felice, which basically forced the Heart Scripter to activate her, as well as just like clear the board for like the rest of my guys and continuously just mill cards. But yeah, that game was a lot of fun. And then from here, we were able to basically just complete the reverse comeback, right? We started off with a round 1 loss, and then we won 7 in a row. And then we get into the final matchup, which is another Malice deck. So 4 Malice, 3 Mitsurugi Raizuel, the 1 Mermail Atlantean, and the 1 Memento. A pretty difficult tournament run for pretty much any deck, right? Especially a rogue deck. And unfortunately, we just were not able to take it. My hands in this matchup they weren't like bad or anything per se, but like my opponent just had like the perfect hand traps to stop me pretty much dead in my tracks every single time. And I essentially just got OTK'd game 1 after I set up a pretty pathetic board for the most part, right? As I basically was only able to end on like a tier cache plus a Tearland Scream, because he negated so many of my cards. And even like the tier cache that I summoned had its effects negated by Imperm. So it was pretty bad. And then I tried to mill some more cards to play during my opponent's turn, but I could not hit anything to save my life. And suffice to say, like I literally just got access coded into Oblivion. And then even though I was able to survive very briefly because my Tearland Scream lowered all their guys' attacks, it wasn't enough, especially once I stared down Allied Code, plus the White Binder, plus the Access Code, plus the Red Ransom, plus the MTP07 that was set. And we moved on to game 2. Game 2, I get hit by Perulia in the draw phase, and my hand is basically all normal summons, I guess. So I have Engraver, Lurie, Felice, Soliak, and Super Polymerization. So I just think I can just go full Fiendsmith combo and it should be okay, right? So I go activate my Engraver in hand, adding Tract effect. I'm adding Weiss this time just because it is a light fiend monster, and then I can use it during like the next turn to potentially just go into like my synchro plays. And I would have used it that turn, but something happens later on in the game that just allows me not to do it. And so I go for full Fiendsmith combo first after adding the Weiss to my hand. I discard the Luri, trigger the Luri. I attempt to go for a rank 6 and I get hit by Nibiru. And I think, okay, Nibiru is perfectly fine. And then I have like the Weiss in my hand, right? So I can still just full combo. I cannot, because in response to his Nibiru, he changed a second Perulia. And at that point, I figure, you know, I have the Super Poly in my hand. I have the Fiendsmith in Paradise that I sent off the Lacrima that I summoned off my Requiem. I should be able to beat most Malice boards with just those two cards, right? So I let the Nib come down. I don't commit with the Weiss and the Felice. I set my Super Poly and my Celiac because this deck does make access code, right? So they are going to be a little bit weary of popping my back row. Just because they don't want it to trigger, and because if it triggers like a Celiac, right, then I get to add my tier limit monsters, and then we get to continue playing during their turn. But I don't know, like his hand, even though it was like super mediocre after that point, it was pretty much like the exact perfect counter that he needed just to play around my board perfectly, right? As he normal summons an Ash that he top decks for turn, goes for All Mirage, summons up backup Ignister, and from here I basically, even though I had the Super Poly and the Fiendsmith in Paradise, oh, and more importantly, before he actually commits to those boards, he has Sales Ban. So he has Sales Ban, backup Ignister, and the hand trap that he normal summons, and he just Sales Bans my Fiendsmith in Paradise. So right off the bat, I lose one of the more important cards that I would need to just prevent his board from breaking my board, as that's what he ends up calling. And then he goes for like the normal combo, and then like all these guys have different attributes so at no point am I able to Super Poly them, as opposed to like if they had started with one of their better hands, which is just like normal summon Dormouse, right? But yeah, basically, by the time I'm able to activate Super Poly, he already has too much advantage in the form of the Fiendsmith, in the form of the Malice and Underground field spell that he added to his hand, that I can't do anything. So I'm forced to hold it until he attempts to go into the battle phase so that I can fuse away the access code and whatever link 3 he has. And so that's what I do. So I do that. I Super Poly into the Garura. He has a March Hare in his hand, obviously. So he goes March Hare, banish White Binder, bring it back. And that one top deck card is basically the make or break in this matchup. I'm able to top deck Felice, so that means I don't have to commit fully to the Weiss being into the full Fiendsmith combo play. But unfortunately for me, the card that he top decked off the White Binder was the Dominus Impulse, and that basically just completely shut down my plays, as I'm able to stack the Felice on top with the Weiss, but yeah, it gets negated, so I can't even access my synchros, and the tournament run ends like that. So I get 2-0'd by Malice in the finals. But overall, you know, really fun, really exciting stuff. I was really happy with the way that the deck performed, especially because I basically didn't really think I'd get more than one win. But you know, like the deck genuinely just overperformed, and I had a lot of fun playing with it. So I would not have made any changes, at least for the main deck. So we can just go over that pretty briefly, I guess, even though I've already like ruined it. But like I said, it's the same 40 card list. You know, you got your, let me fix this a bit. So we got our Fiendsmith engine being the 3 Engraver, the Lacrima, and the Fabled Luri. We have our tier limit cards being the 3 tier caches, one of each name, the 1 Rhino and the other Rhino. And then for the Lightsworn portion, we had the triple Weiss, which was basically MVP all day, especially if I drew it with like a, even if I drew it without like a card to discard and summon itself, like it completely overperformed all the time, just being able to access the Fiendsmith engine whenever I wanted. We had the double Felice, the double Lightsworn Dragonling, and the 1 Wolf. Ratios perfectly fine for the Lightsworns. Maybe I would change around, like just knock down Felice to 1 because I was drawing it a little bit too often, but I mean, that's just the nature of those cards, right? Like they're bricks for a reason. And even if I was playing like multiple Wolves, like means like the situation would just be changed. But I don't know, like I feel like the second tuner came up a lot. So maybe I wouldn't change it. Then we're also playing like the 3 Ash Blossoms to stop the Charmies when we went first, which happened sometimes, but not all the time. And then the 1 Shuffler, which just allows us to control the graveyard whenever it's in the graveyard, right? Then for the spells, we have the 3 Planets, the 2 Screams, the 1 Talent, 1 Call By, the 1 Tract, Grief, Foolish, Meta Noise, Charge of Light Brigade, Double Celiac, and Fiendsmith in Paradise. Like I said, the exact same 40 card list that I showcased the other week. So nothing special there. And then for the extra deck, this actually does have something that I would change, but we'll get to that when we get to that. So for now, we're just going to go. So we have our Kaleido Heart up here, Dragostapelia, Mud Dragon, Necroquip, and the Fiendsmith's Desiree as our fusion monsters. We have an SP Little Knight for our links, along with the Fiendsmith links being like the Sequence, the Requiem, and the Moon. We have our Synchros being the Visa Samratara and the Minerva, which is what our Lightsworn combo is basically going to be accessing every single time. And then for the Exceeds, we have the Dugaris, the Pilgrim Reaper, the Zombie Vampire, and the High King Caesar. For the most part, I'd probably keep the extra deck unchanged. The only thing that I would cut is the Wave High King Caesar, because I quite literally just never made this. I would always go for Pilgrim Reaper instead to mill 5 cards. And what I wish I had played instead of this is actually Garura, because there was one point, especially in the final round, where if I just made Garura, I would have been able to draw 1 card deeper as well as just have full access to my Fiendsmith combo. But alas, it just was not meant to be. But, you know, it's all good. But yeah, that's the only change I would have made to the extra deck. And then for the side deck, so we have like the 1 Mischief of the Nose for the Mitsurugi Raizio matchup, just to turn that one into an auto win. We have Bestial Druisform and Bestial Magnum, which I just did not draw all weekend, which is fine. Sometimes it's just going to be that way, you know. We had the triple Molcharmy Fuelos, which I would have liked to see more often whenever I was going second, but I pretty much only did it once. We have the 3 Artifact Lancias, which is for Malice, but I just never drew it all weekend, much like the Bestials. And then we have the 1 Volcanic Scattershot, just to help us a little bit more easier when we are going into time, because you are going to go into time with this deck. Then for the other 3 ofs, we're playing the 3 Super Polymerization. So originally I was putting these in for the Mitsurugi version of Raizio, just because I would be able to fuse away all their ritual monsters, right, and set up like a Garura of my own. And but ultimately, I just, like, halfway through the tournament, I just decided to stop doing that and just put in the Molcharmies and the Bestials. Not like it helped, because I never drew them anyways, but in theory, this is pretty solid, especially, or even with like a Detonator, right? Like, I could normal summon one of my Lightsworn monsters or a Fiendsmith monster, and then, especially like if it's Lacrima, I activate their effects, I chain Super Poly, get rid of the Detonator, and then I bring out like a Mud Dragon of the Swamp. But it just was not meant to be. And then for the final 2 slots, we have the 1 Sprite Sprint, which lets us send the Volcanic Scattershot. I would constantly put it in, but I would never summon it. And then the 1 Garura, which, like I said earlier, I really just wish I was able to main deck it, because it really just did come up a lot, even outside of like the final round. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the way that the deck performed. Like I said, it was a really fun event. And that's all I have to say. I hope you guys enjoyed me rambling for the past 30 minutes. Hopefully I didn't take up too much of your time with just nonsensical nonsense, right? And if you enjoyed the content, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya!